All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kathy Mochapau. I'm the Executive Director with the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council in St. Paul. I will be co-moderating today with my colleague and friend, Drew.
Great. Welcome to this Minnesota Arts Town Hall. My name is Drew Digby. I'm the Executive Director of the Arrowhead Regional Arts Council and the current President of the Forum of Regional Arts Councils. Together, we are hosting this town hall. You should know that representatives of many agencies and organizations are here listening as well. They include the Forum of Regional Arts Councils of Minnesota, the Minnesota State Arts Board, Minnesota Presenters Network, Arts Midwest, Springboard for the Arts, Minnesota Theater Alliance, the City of Minneapolis Office of Arts, Culture, and Creative Economy, and Minnesota Citizens for the Arts. In addition, many other arts funders are signed up and listening. Before we get going, I wanted to do a land acknowledgement. The land I speak from is historically land of the Ojibwe people. As an individual and representative of my organization, we are currently working to better understand the specific history that has brought us to this place in time. For that reason, I've been researching the tract of land that I live on. I know that it was included in the Treaty of 1854. My property is part of a piece of land that white settlers took from Ojibwe owners shortly after the treaty, violating the treaty's terms from the very beginning. I also know that the community I live in has often been a place of refuge and hope for Black Americans, but history also shows that the promise of refuge and hope has been tragically crushed many times. I am still learning and working to challenge the inequities that still exist. Let me go over the mechanics of today's town hall. We have many people signed up to speak. We may have time for others to speak. If you would like to do so, use the raise your hand function and we will take note. Each speaker has 2 minutes. We have a timekeeper who will mute speakers who go over their time. We know all of you have a lot more to say. Please add comments into the chat function. They'll be shared with all the sponsors. Many of them are planning a follow-up email to answer questions to respond to what is said today. So if you have anything you want to have answers, please put in the chat function. We are recording the session and we're going to share the recording in the chat. Also, please keep your microphones on mute and please make sure that your video is not on unless you're speaking because that hurts the bandwidth for a lot of people. So thank you very much. Now let me ask Kathy to talk about the content and context. Kathy?
Yeah, thank you, Drew. So before we get started, I want to ground us in today's purpose and intent. We've asked you all here so that we can listen to you about your vision and ideas for the future of the Minnesota arts and culture community. So we've spent the last few weeks hearing stories about lost opportunities and income, making it hard to pay for food and rent. We've heard about the impact of isolation on mental health and the fear for what is ahead if this continues. We're all experiencing some level of trauma, and it's going to take time for recovery. We believe that the road to recovery will require creative thinking to imagine a post-pandemic reality that isn't just about going back to the way things were. We know that this community is made up of the most creative minds in the state, and we want to hear your vision and ideas for how to move forward. Even with all the uncertainty that surrounds us now, we are certain that all of you are integral to the economic, social, and cultural health and wellness of the state, and we are committed to supporting you as best as we can. So for today's town hall, we'd like to suggest the following norms for how to be on this Zoom call together. First and foremost, I've been on so many Zoom calls, and I always expect for the best, but I also expect some glitches. So just be patient with us. We'll try our best to deal with any technical glitches as we go along. But the norms that we'd like to suggest for today are to please assume best intentions, listen for understanding, acknowledge that we all have privilege and that we all make mistakes, recognize the space that we take up and are hold because of this privilege. We ask that we respect each other's opinions and experiences, for speakers to speak honestly from their own experience, for everyone to exercise self-care, appreciate the silence and processing time, and definitely bring kindness. So as Drew had mentioned, we'll take turns letting the speakers know that they are up next. We will both call the next speaker and the speaker on deck. So when you hear your name, please prepare to unmute yourself before you speak. So I'd like to just get right to the first speaker for today. We have Shay Cage with Catalyst Arts from Minneapolis.
Hi, everybody. I just want to start with a thank you and a prayer of wellness and hope to all that are here. I've created some quick bullet points for this limited time that represent my thoughts and my conversations with multiple people in my community. And I'm just going to barrel through them and cut me off at the 2 minutes in respect of other people's time. First suggestion is a rethinking of what creating room and space at the table really looks like. The current process here and for our city is wrought with an inequitable practice. Small and tiny grassroots organizations and artists have not fully been included in planning, strategizing, and ways of surviving together, and that's unfortunate. It's created frustration, anxiety, and confusion, and a simple survey is not the answer to understanding need and strategy. Nor mysterious erasure of key grants. Many of us rely on their many great ideas, and these small organizations and artists have really intelligent recommendations. Second, the need for adaptation grants so we can all pivot and create access and digital innovation at this time is crucial. Third, re-granting emergency funds, such as like Springboard is able to get large groups of funds from many multiple sources. What about giving big lumps or smaller lumps or medium-sized lumps to smaller organizations that are out here on the grassroots? We have really immediate access to our community and urgent needs. Fourth, multiple sources of relief and, more importantly, sustainable support are needed now. Just not one or two. So thank God for IMRAC and your $2,500 program for small organizations, but where are the other sources? So really thinking about tiered and multiple ways that we have source. One I have is bridges need to really be built right now, you guys. The ways we work together right now will speak volumes about who we are as a community, as people, how we look at the value of who all we are, and the solidarity that we really understand in the ecosystem that is the Twin Cities. So I just really urgently suggest that we work together in a way that might feel new to how we typically do work and process.
Thank you so much. Oh. Okay, thank you, Shay. So I'll just admit that as a member of the community, I will try my best to kind of not make too many comments. I will uphold my responsibility as moderator. So if and I forgot to say who was on deck. So Joko Sutrisno is next from St. Paul with Sumanar, Indonesia Music and Dance. And then on deck is Elisa Voshel from Minnesota Center for Book Arts.
Thank you. Can you hear me? All right. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I really appreciate for the town hall meetings. Basically, I would like to a little bit echoing what the previous speakers is, but I just focus on the operating part. There is so many arts organizations that has been producing high quality of art in the community for a long time. And then in the past, these organizations, usually they are not qualified to apply a grant for, because they're small, because they're under 174,000. So these art organizations, right now, they're stuck with their lease because they are, most of them are renting the space. So again, they're stuck. They cannot hold any exercise, rehearsal, classes, and so on. So we would like to have some idea how can we help these organizations. That's basically is my concerns. And I do really appreciate that, again, MBREC has over 2,500, but this is so many of them. So, so if there's qualifications, what kind of eligibilities we need to look at? Okay, because again, there are many organizations that has been in the community for 10, 20 years, but again, they are in the very challenging situation right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Joko. Up next, we have Elisa Voshal from the Minnesota Center for Book Arts in Minneapolis. And then on deck is Fred Rogers from Walker Bay Theater.
Hi, can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. One concern that I have is that the arts are being left out of a lot of the emergency funding, and that the arts are not being seen as the essential service and the essential social and cohesive, the force for social cohesion that I believe the arts are in our community. And so what I would really like to see is advocates on the local and state level, advocating for funding that recognizes the pivotal importance of the arts for our personal and social well-being, and the importance that the arts and arts organizations play in the economics of our state, in employing so many teaching artists and other creatives in the field. I think for a lot of arts organizations that have been heavily dependent on earned revenue through in-person experiences, that this is really a sea change in terms of our business models, and that we need funding to help us pivot to a new reality that is virtually based, and to help bring our communities with us and employ the artists that we work with. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. Up next, we have Fred Rogers from Walker with Walker Bay Theater. And then on deck is Deneen Richburg with Brown Body.
Hello. Yes, Fred Rogers here. I agree with the previous speaker's words on funding and the recognition of the arts as a viable part of our everyday lives, which is one of the tenets of the Minnesota State Arts Board also. Up in northern Minnesota here, I see a number of my neighbors in the arts are in this town hall, but we are all faced with the same situations with funding, how we go about moving forward with the season, and how our communities can work with us. My friends up in Bemidji have got the radio show, which I need to thank them for doing. Locally, my community, my townships surrounding Walker have donated funds to our theater. Not a lot of money, but they recognize the arts as a viable tool for their communities. Yesterday, I was in a town hall or a coffee conference with artistic directors, and one comment made is the arts are a gathering place. And we look forward to the day where we can all gather with our audiences and be part of that community. Online and streaming events are a good temporary fix for the arts, but in the long run, we need to be gathered in our communities, performing for our communities, and keeping the arts alive as a part of our everyday lives in Minnesota. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Up next is Deneen Richburg from St. Paul with Brown Body. And then on deck is Liz Dodson with International Association of female artists in Minneapolis. Deneen, you're next.
Yes. Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay? Perfect. So I want to reiterate a lot of kind of what's already been said. Right now, I'm just going to speak from personal experience. We are in a place of trying to figure things out. We are trying to figure out, how to continue to pay the artists and instructors that were supposed to be a part of our spring programming that's been totally canceled. We're trying to figure out, what does our 2020-2021 programming look like? How do I'm operating with the assumption that COVID is still going to be around and is still going to be something that we have to contend with. So how do we pivot? How do we switch? So the idea of adaptation grants, or just essentially support funding without any parameters around it, would be extremely helpful, I know, to myself and as well as so many other small organizations. We would love to be able to do some really serious strategizing and possibly bring in consultants to help us with that process, to figure out how do we continue to move forward, and how do we continue to even operate and support the communities that we are in. Not everybody has access to internet and have, a laptop or what have you. So how do we continue to build with community in this stage? I also want to offer this. I'm wondering, so often, again, from my experience, it seems like decisions regarding what criteria are put in place to apply for a specific grant, or what types of grants, pools of resources are even available. It seems like those decisions happen kind of behind the scenes in a non-transparent manner. And I'm really wanting to see situations and opportunities, and maybe they have already existed and I'm just not aware of them, where the arts organizations and the artists are actually in those decision-making conversations and are actually making those decisions. So I would love to see more exploration in terms of how do we put the responsibility for creating these funding structures in.
Sorry, Deneen, I think your time is up. Thank you, though. I really appreciate those suggestions. Up next is Lyd Dodson from Minneapolis.
Yes. Okay. My name is Liz Dodson, and I'm a vice president of the IAFA, which is the International Association of Female Artists. We're wondering how we can combine our talents and empathy toward a local nursing home during this worldwide pandemic. Perhaps make appropriate virus guideline signage for them. Maybe make suggestions for a themed senior drawing or painting class with a monthly exhibition there of their artwork. Also, we might loan or contribute some of our drawings, paintings, prints for their environment. We would appreciate your suggestions on how to approach a local nursing home to offer our art skills, and any other ideas or suggestions you may have for this endeavor. So I'm just putting out that call for others to contribute to this. We feel like nursing homes are the place where the most people are dying at this time. And so anything that we can do as an artist to show our empathy for them, to share our art skills, we feel this is what our organization, the International Association of Female Artists, would like to do as an activist activity that is maybe needed, especially at this particular time. So we have a website. It's aifartist.com.
Thank you very, very much. Next up will be Jim Umhofer from Sauk Center and the Sinclair Lewis Foundation, followed by Mary Torres from Strive Publishing. Jim? Jim, are you here? How about if we
Can you
then
hear me?
skip? Yes, now we can.
All right,
Thank
good. All right, thank you. Jim Umhafer, Sauk Center, Sinclair Lewis Foundation. Beautiful spring day. Thank you for this opportunity. I also would like to take the chance to thank the Central Minnesota Arts Board, who has been a huge supporter of our work in promoting writing. We are hopefully going to sponsor our 31st annual Sinclair Lewis Writers Conference this fall, maybe not. However, the Central Minnesota Arts Board has been a big part of that support. This decade, this year, 2020, marks the centennial of Sinclair Lewis's novel Main Street. Throughout this decade, his 5 major novels. We're looking at some statewide initiatives through the State Arts Board. Our concern is that we are a small arts organization in a small town. It's going to be very difficult for at least 3 years for these small towns and for our organization to recover. Our concern is that we are hoping that the State Arts Board might be able to waive the cash match requirements for the next 3 years. That's really all I want to share right now, but just gratitude for the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up will be Mary Torres from Robbinsdale and Strive Publishing. On deck is Leon Thurman of Burnsville. Mary?
Hi. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and have this opportunity to speak on behalf of children's literature and then literature that represents marginalized voices, in particular African American voices. I've received so many inquiries right now from people who want to know how to get their life stories published. And I think it's a fitting time to figure out a way to work together to uplift those voices that are not typically heard, especially in the publishing industry. At Strive Publishing, we focus on African American voices, specifically in children's book publishing. However, with the community wanting to know how to get their stories out there, I feel like we need to find a way to reach the people in the community, specifically in North Minneapolis, and work together on building pathways for African American authors, whether they want to write their memoirs or contribute to getting more books buying about African Americans into the hands of children, but also our African American illustrators and editors, because there aren't a lot in the publishing industry. And with Strive Publishing, we have really struggled with finding or creating a market that really wholly represents African American voices. But at the same time, you know, when people hear about Strive, there are other marginalized voices that need to be heard. So we're trying to figure out a way to work across cultures and across generations. So with resources being so tight and in such demand, there's such competition, I'm just really encouraging people to find ways to collaborate and to partner together. Thank you for hearing me out this morning.
Thank you very much. Next up is Leon Thurman from Burnsville and the Voice Care Network. Following that will be Laura Hill from the Million Artists Movement. Leon?
Yes, I think we could all agree that the arts are a means for human self-expression, and in the times that we're living in, boy, is that going to be increasingly important. And by which we can do that. That includes, of course, music, the visual arts, dance, theater. I call it the story arts, which includes literature, poetry, etc. An idea that I've had is if in whatever organizations that could do this, to facilitate online programs or events that would enable or give opportunity for people to express themselves in the art or arts that they use to express themselves. That this is something that could possibly be spread over all over Minnesota, local I just put this together, and so I'm sort of stumbling for words, but there's also the possibility of allying with local arts educators in music and visual and dance and theater and so forth. So there may be people like on Zoom, for one thing, contacting the local people in some way, finding out who they are, the local educators, and that could be woven into this idea of facilitating online self-expression events for us human beings. I sing, and voice is an important part of what I do, and the Voice Care Network works with
Thank you, Leon. If you have some more comments, please put them in the chat so we can hear the rest of what you have to say. Thank you. Next up will be Laura Hill from Minneapolis and the Million Artists Movement, followed by Kiyoko Sims, an independent artist. Laura?
Hi. I am here speaking about Million Artists Movement. We're a really small grassroots organization, and we really definitely feel the impact of these decisions, then the changing tide of things. And some things we've been talking about a lot is just all of the invisible labor that goes into all of the work that we do. We're really run primarily on volunteer work. A lot of artists, Black, Brown, Indigenous artists, and folks that are working for Black liberation, and we use the arts kind of at a nexus of art and politics, and to move the conversation forward. And in this time of crisis, we're really finding, obviously the work is still going to continue to happen, but it makes it really challenging for artists, especially artists that are already in crisis and that are from communities that are historically marginalized and oppressed, to then not be able to plan for the future. And to have so many things that are unknown. And so we're really also curious about some of the other things folks have echoed about how do we be creative with our resources. I mean, as artists, we are adaptable, we're creative, we have lots of ideas. And I think that if anyone's gonna solve a lot of these problems that we're facing, I think artists are gonna be key to thinking of creative solutions. And our organization has always been driven by our community needs. And so, you know, creating content and arts for our community that's by us. And I think something that would be really important is to have that adaptability, as it has been spoken about, the adaptation grants, having the opportunity to honor the work that's already kind of been done, and the labor that has gone into the initial grants, but then thinking about how do we adapt them, how do we collaborate together to kind of make our voices all more amplified and powerful in this time. So I think something that would be really important to think about is how do we be more flexible.
Laura, that's it. Thank you very much. Please keep providing the rest of your ideas you feel you got cut up in the chat. So thank you. And just a reminder to everybody that we probably will have time for a few more speakers beyond our list. We've already got one person who's raised their hand to speak later, and we'll get to those folks as soon as we get through our list. Next up is Kiyoko Sims, an independent artist from Minneapolis, to be followed by Alexis Walstead from the Karen Organization of Minnesota. Kiyoko?
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. And I just want to share my concerns about the arts programming at school for next year of 2021, especially due to the suspension of MSAB Arts Learning Grant for next year. So even before the COVID, a lot of the schools are really experiencing the huge budget cuts and even more next year. And a lot of the people have put, the teachers and the school administrators have put a lot of thoughts and time to apply for the grants. What I'm really concerned about it is because of the arts learning grants suspension and the declining budget, how much arts programming we are actually going to have for next year. It is going to have a huge impact. And because of the schools experiencing such a huge cuts of arts programming to start with, having some sort of arts programming continuation for next year for the health of the young people and also keep the creativity going at school will be pretty crucial. I just want to also let people to be aware of schools' commitment, because this is one of the few grants school could apply. There are very few grants a school could be the applicant. And for some schools to be able to apply for this grant is to have a time commitment to actually write grants. So for some schools, sub-teacher not taking sub-hours, losing income, but to have a priority to have the time to create competitive grants. So moving forward, if we could also consider really the commitment of the schools and school needs for the future funding consideration, that would be really great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Up next is Alexis Walstead of St. Paul and the Karen Organization of Minnesota, and she'll be followed by Mary Ellen Domir of New Ulm, and I'll turn it back over to Kathy after this speaker. Alexis?
All right, thank you very much for having us. I'm representing the Karen Weaving Circle, which is a project of the Karen Organization of Minnesota. It's a group of about 10 refugee women from Burma who come together every week to practice weaving together, and then they also teach classes for youth to weave. So I definitely echo Kiyoko's comments about the difficulty of finding arts funding for schools. Schools are rarely, if ever, able to pay for weaving instructors. That's something we rely on our state arts board grant to pay for. Some questions and concerns from the group I wanted to raise up is just that the weavers are really struggling with trying to figure out how to adapt programming if they can't meet in person. It's a very hands-on activity. Some weavers are able to weave at home, but others say that it's hard because they don't have space, they have children at home, and they can't teach without being together face-to-face. So we're worried about continued funding if that's no longer able to meet. Most of the members of the group are low income, and so they're really concerned about day-to-day needs and may not have the creative energy to devote to this. And I would say that's true of a lot of low income artists. Another concern is that the group members really would not feel comfortable applying as individual artists. Most of them are not fluent in English and just aren't used to the project management requirements. I will say the Arts Board grant application and report are both some of the most time consuming that I deal with as an organizational leader, and they're just not willing or able to take that on. So we're wanting to ask how arts funders will allow non-arts organizations who are supporting underrepresented artists to apply, or if they'll be left out of this type of funding. And if, again, echoing the questions about relaxing grant application and reporting requirements and planning, applying 6 months or more in advance, it's really hard right now to plan for what we're going to be doing next year. And then ending just to say that this group has been really important to reduce stress and build confidence for the members and to build community with the youth. And so how can we advocate for our arts to be part of the larger recovery efforts?
Thank you, Alexis. And thanks to all the speakers so far and everybody that is also commenting in the chat. There's a healthy conversation going on there as well. It does look like we'll have some additional time. So if you are interested in speaking also, if this conversation so far has sparked some ideas for you, please just raise your hand and we'll be noting that as well. Our next speaker is Mary Ellen Domir from New Ulm, from the State Street Theater Company. And then on deck is Barbara Bridges from Art to Change the World. So Mary Ellen, you're up next. Is Mary Ellen with us?
Oh, here.
Okay.
Got it? All right. I represent the State Street Theater in New Ulm, Minnesota. We inherited, if you will, a historic site several years ago, and we have brought to it multiple performing art venues, including 4 plays a year, as well as many performing artists. So our situation at this point is, how do we move back into opening up? A second issue, and others have addressed this as well, is the financial situation of having an entity that has operating expenses associated with it, like utilities and insurance and upkeep and so forth, when you have 4 or 5 months with no revenues coming in. So that's of concern to us. As far as I would look forward to some collaborating in figuring out ways to enter back into the scene, and those grants that some of us get excluded from as well, operating costs. Some of the things that we've done in order to keep ourselves visible is a story time. We collaborate with our local cable access television, and our actors are reading storybooks in character to young children. Another thing that we have done, working with the local cable access television, is encourage families to take one of the plays that have been performed or some of the plays that will be performed and come up with the scene and the costumes. And we have a photo contest. So that too will be publicized on local cable access. I'm just sharing those as some particular ideas to let people know that, at least for theaters and regional performing arts centers out in the outstate area of Minnesota, as a way to say that we're here, we're going to stay, we're positive, and but we need help just like everybody else does. Thank you.
Thank you for hosting this meeting. Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes.
I'm Barbara Bridges, the director of the Northeast Minneapolis-based global nonprofit called Art to Change the World. We are a diverse coalition of over 350 change makers across generations and cultures, employing the arts in service of positive social change. We believe artists should be paid for their work, just like everyone else. So what words are relevant at a time like this? I think that the world we knew before the arrival of COVID-19 has gone, and it's never coming back. We will learn how to fight back and conquer the virus and put a floor under the economy. But along the way, we will be creating and adapting to the new normal, as many of my colleagues have said today. ACW has been purpose visioning for the last year. We asked ourselves, how can ACW serve our members and the world? We knew changes were coming, but who could have predicted this? Today, I'm inviting you to reach out to ACW and to ask us to help meet with your mission. We are artists, teachers, scientists, and supporters with diverse resources. We can partner with you. Currently, we are hosting free Zoom kid sessions, meeting time for other nonprofits. We are creating custom masks and starting a network of Action and Hope project. We are also sharing resources on our COVID Chronicles and our new Art to Change the World channel. Please consider hosting a program. Stipends are available. If you'd like to learn more, go to our website, arttochangetheworld.org, or email me, info@arttochangetheworld.org, to speak directly about resources and requests. Thank you so much for your time, and peace to you all.
Thank you, Barbara. Up next, we have Jim McDonough. Jim McDonough, sorry, I was not able to call your name on deck, but Jim McDonough is next, and then on deck is Dave Moore. Jim
Hello,
McDonough.
I'm Jim McDonough. I'm the board chair of the Park Theater Company, St. Louis Parks Community Theater. Just want to say a few words that during this time, the most critical component of everything that we're dealing with is leadership. And so I encourage the leaders of the organizations that have put this together to really bear down, and we don't have time to waste our time. Artists are very creative. We will survive. You have a huge cadre of people and creatives here who are willing to come forth. However, about to be paid. We already took a hit with the tax changes. We have 40% reduction in our individual owners because of charitable contributions being kind of erased. And then this thing came upon us. I was pleased to see somebody put the amount of time. My organization is board chair, we're all volunteers, paid staff, 70 to 80 hours going into a proposal to get back. Well, unfortunately, you weren't chosen, right? At this time, it's like staying, wait for the next slate to come. We don't have any. I feel for the people that have large overheads. We're going to survive. We're just going to hunker down. But on the other hand, I would really encourage the funders, the major funders, when you get a proposal and you can't fund it, why not pass it on to another potential funder? Because the plan is in place. The effort is going in, but simply say, well, the next cycle, or we wish you well, we hope you can pull this off. We can't pull it off without your resources now. Our individual funds are gone, and they're not coming back. So I really encourage you to be leaders, real leaders. That we waste our time. And be careful of what you say in public press. It has a backlash. A lot of people consider artists like the last thing to bring to a wedding, like the trim on a house.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Up next is Dave Moore with Multiple in Minneapolis.
Hi, everyone. It's Dave Moore. Good morning. In a past life, I worked professionally in the theater for several decades. I'm a painter today, and I'm also in a position to volunteer in the community for a number of arts organizations, my wife as well. And we also look after a small family foundation. What I'm hearing is, well, let me play by the rules here. My question was, how, looking at for theaters and dance companies in particular, how do they imagine phasing their live performances back in? None of us know when. It could be later this year, it could be 2023, you know, for the sake of safety and the absence of a vaccine. And even after a vaccine is reintroduced, the economy is going to take years to pick back up. So my question is, how creatively are theaters and dance organizations trying to imagine how they can continue their wonderful work in a world that's going to give them far smaller audiences and far fewer resources, probably for years to come? And that's my question. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Next up is Jennifer Ilse from Minneapolis in the off-leash area contemporary performance, and then followed by Ashley Hanson.
Hi, it's good to be here. I'm the co-artistic director of Off-Leash Area, and we're a multidisciplinary performing arts group. We also just acquired our own performing arts venue a few years ago. I'll reiterate a lot of the things that have already been said about especially looking for operational support to build long-term sustainability. As an artist-run organization, of course, so many of our projects are on hold, and we're trying to figure out how to refigure out so many things, but especially from the point of having our own small performing arts venue in Minneapolis. There have been so many venues that have been closing in recent years, and for a lot of reasons, and the lack of long-term sustainability has been a part of getting us to this point of not having a lot of infrastructure to begin with in order to survive something like this. And then we have fallen through those cracks of funding, but then also we're falling through a lot of other cracks at this point that we're hoping can be filled in some ways through any additional funding elsewhere. So yeah, it's just a really tough time right now, and we're really hoping that there can be some additional help, especially for small venues. We're the ones that seem to be told so often that we are direly needed in this community, but we seem to be less and less and less of us, and there seems to be more of a concentration of venues being run by just larger organizations, and it seems like organizations like us running our own performing arts venue, they're just like almost disappearing.
Thank you very much. Sorry to cut you off. Please put more in the comments and we'll make sure everyone gets those. So next up is Ashley Hanson, followed by G. Michael Vargas. And if we have maybe a couple more slots if someone wants to raise their hand and also speak. So Ashley?
Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Kathy. First, I want to thank the individuals who did the heavy lifting to pull this group of organizations together and for providing this space and opportunity for deep listening. And hello to my colleagues from across the state. I'm the director of the Department of Public Transformation and Arts organization based in rural southwestern Minnesota. And my biggest concern, and it's definitely not a new concern, is that artists and cultural workers based in rural and tribal communities do not and will not have equitable access to arts funding in our state, be that COVID relief funding or future funding programs being developed. And I'm not alone in these concerns. There's a group of folks on the ground that got together to organize around our requests for transparency in decision-making and increased public input in the form of a letter to the State Arts Board and the Governor's Office. In that letter included our hopes to see our field make a more concerted effort for transparency and public input. To echo and build on many points made by Laura and Shay and many others, one of our proposed ideas for how to address this concern was to create an independent working group of artists and arts leaders, representative of individual artists, artists of color, American Indian and Indigenous artists, and rural and small arts organizations and arts organizations led by American Indian and Indigenous artists and artists of color to collaborate with our private and public funders and arts advocates to develop processes that ensure we have equitable access to relief funding and future funding programs as they are developed. This working group would do what we are all asked to do in our grant applications, to work towards equitable representation, authentic outreach, and systems redesign, to look beyond, well, we didn't fund anyone from X community because we didn't get any applicants from X community, and ask the question, why didn't we get applicants? What inequities exist in our system that keeps folks from applying, and what creative solutions can we find to address these barriers? As a field, we ask other sectors to engage artists and house artists in residence, but we don't always ask the same of our field, to look to our artists. We are here wanting to help design and build the most equitable, beautiful, transparent, creative processes possible. It's what we do. So involve us, involve artists in the process, and pay us for our work. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Michael Vargas, Managing Director for Zarango Flamenco Dance Theater. My heart goes out to everyone suffering during this time, but challenge begets creativity. We are looking to connect in different ways with the community. Currently, we are offering free online classes to assist us in developing a distance learning program. We are discussing free pop-up performances throughout the Twin Cities and outdoor spaces that allow for social distancing. Our goal is to keep artists engaged and keep creating art. I would love to hear more about how other organizations are planning differently for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up will be Julie Guidry, followed by Christina Woods. Julie?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for allowing me to share some of my thoughts. As we continue to think about solutions and needs that we have immediately and into the long term, I encourage every single one of us, including our funders alike, to pay close attention to how we are thinking about access and inclusion of individuals of all abilities, including people with disabilities. Specifically, in a situation like this in Zoom, we have great opportunity to provide free closed captioning, a service that is provided that can be downloaded by any of the hosts that ultimately are hosting this program here. I'm going to go ahead and share that closed captioning service in the chat room as I'm speaking right now, something that I encourage each and every single one of us to start and implement and have within any of these Zoom meetings. The second piece is that as you think about the short-term and the long-term solutions, really imagining how you are including individuals with disabilities, individuals that are in need of ASL supports and services, and thinking very, very creatively for how we can ensure that those continued services do not fall by the wayside and be considered as a secondary priority, but are instead used as an opportunity to innovate now in this moment in time when each and every single one of us is being asked to innovate. Your innovation to include people with disabilities makes each and every one of our work ultimately work. And your thought for the long-term solutions starting right now ultimately ensures that every individual, regardless of ability or disability, can successfully engage in the work that you are doing in the virtual space and in the live space. Please help remember that this piece, I close with one single piece in consideration, and that is that after 7 weeks, I am still not able to see my son who lives in a group home because of the restrictions that are put in place around COVID-19. And if we don't believe that they and people like my son are going to continue to be in seclusion and segregated from our community much longer than the rest of us, we are kidding ourselves. This work and your innovation now and utilizing some of the services that are available now is going to make a true impact on access and inclusion for all of our people with disabilities.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate that. Next up will be Christina Woods, followed by Karen Charles. Christina?
I would like to make a few strong points, one around absent narratives, and I feel it would be great to have the larger organizations do some messaging around the absent narratives when it comes to arts and the power of art in building thriving community, which is what we are really intending to do with the work that we want to do going forward. I also think it'd be wonderful to have a landing platform for all these resources that artists and organizations could go to. I'm trying to keep up with everything on the Duluth Art Institute website, and it's been helpful and useful, but I would like to have one landing platform for so many of these grants and how to fill out your unemployment insurance and what people are doing to inspire art in our communities. Are there resources for attorneys to help us find ways to build language around negotiating leases and some of these other things that our smaller arts organizations are really struggling with, and maybe even interpret some of the lease language and not just specific to leases, but could there be some work to find pro bono attorneys right now to help arts organizations with some of these legal issues? 2 more points. I think it would be very helpful to create some leadership circles. What visual arts needs are very different from the performing arts needs. It'd be wonderful to find funding to create leadership circles. It's something that I was very luckily able to do, but it can only accommodate about 10 people. So if we could, as arts organizations, lean into that leadership and create some circles. I don't know who's out there with available funding, but for $2,500, I'm getting a consultant to do some leadership training during this time. And that will happen over the course of
Sorry, Christina, we ran out of time there. Thank you very much. Please put any more comments onto our chat. I would like, next will be Karen Charles, followed, I'm going to turn it back over to Kathy after that, but Aaron Johnson will be the first speaker there. We probably have room for a couple more speakers, so if you'd like to, please raise your hand, and we'd be really interested in hearing what you have to say. So next up, Karen Charles.
Hi, thanks so much, Drew. I'm Karen Charles, representing Threads Dance Project, and I want to reiterate a statement that some people have been making about there's the general recognition, the lack of general operating support for organizations. And that's been created by the current way we fund. Funding is all done project to project, and organizations need space and time to build creative, innovative programs. And then you don't have that if you're depending on project by project support. This is especially exacerbated for artists of color, such as myself, where there have been systemic impediments overall, even for project-based funding, and the absence of generational wealth for many artists of color, as opposed to other artists. I just think that if we could rethink the entire system so that we don't force organizations into a project-based mindset, we could see the growth, the innovation, and the creativity much more significantly. And again, that's why we're being impacted so directly now. Organizations can't plan, they can't build for sustainability if they don't have the infrastructure.
All right, thank you, Karen. Just a reminder, we are still tracking people that are raising their hands. If you are, if you'd like to speak, if you've been inspired, or if something has come to your mind, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. Up next is Aaron Johnson, and then on deck is Aaron Young.
Am I on?
Yes.
Yeah, I work with CLUS, which is Comunidad Latinas Unidas en Servicio. We're a Latino community organization. I guess I wanted to express two ideas. One is that whatever guidelines come out of this, they should be focused on equity. I find that given the way that the State Arts Board and MRAC makes decisions, there's oftentimes on a case-by-case basis, so panelists look at each individual proposal rather than kind of systemically at who is being excluded. I think there was a comment earlier about a lot of communities not applying in the first place, and so there are inequities in funding. So whatever the decisions that are made, I would strongly advocate for an equity lens systemically, not necessarily on a case-by-case basis for each proposal, but system-wide. The other thing that I thought about was we are a community organization that has arts projects and arts activities, and a lot of the State Arts Board funding sometimes is exclusively for arts organizations. And there was an email that was sent out after the coronavirus closure of all the funding systems through the State Arts Board that said something about artists and arts organizations, and I want to make sure that there aren't sort of careless language that is included in the guidelines for new funding in June, so that organizations that are not technically classified as arts organizations, but that work on arts projects or have arts activities that are community organizations can be included in those funding structures.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Up next is Aaron Young, and then on deck is Mankwei Ndosi.
Hello, I'm Aaron Young. I'm the managing director of the Great River Shakespeare Festival down in Winona in the southeast portion of the state. And I would like to express thanks to so many of the service organizations who have kept me on their mailing list, even though we are not members right now. So we've been receiving information regularly from the Theater Alliance, the Minnesota Citizens for the Arts, and the Council of Nonprofits, as well as, well, that's good. But I'm so grateful because we've received lots of information about funding opportunities. I would like to encourage all of these organizations to see if there's ways to get best practices for reopening, especially for venues. I'm seeing things from the Broadway industry, which we are not that, and also the movie theater industry, which we are not that either. And so I'm curious to see when we do begin to gather what are our best practices for operating in venues throughout the state that can be shared. And I'd also like to encourage whoever advocates with the corporate community to encourage ways to encourage corporate philanthropy to happen. We're hearing from our corporate community that their focus right now is on their employees, as it should be, but so much of their corporate philanthropy toward the arts is also supporting employees, and we rely on their support to keep our employees employed. So, to help encourage them to continue to give during these times and not just focus their resources exclusively on their own organization would be very helpful. And that's all from me.
Thank you, Aaron. Up next is Mankwei Ndosi, and then on deck is Vicki Stenerson.
Oh. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone, for bringing this together and for all the hard work y'all do for artists and the arts in our communities. I want to encourage people, as many others have said, to see this as moving into a new era as opposed to thinking that we're going to be going back to the way things are. And so to use this opportunity to, as many others have said, adjust and correct some injustices and inequities of the past. Also to look at the nonprofit structure as a 1.0, as structure 1.0. So as you're moving through this time, as you continue to lead organizations, to be recording what about this structure works, what doesn't work, what would actually make it more sustainable in the future, because the nonprofit structure is only an early version of the structure. As others have said, think both long and short term. I think it's a powerful opportunity as we reopen to continue to make rural and urban connections. Many have talked about access for rural communities and tribal communities. And I also encourage nonprofits to think about building, as we move forward, to building relationships with the neighborhoods and the people that are around them, as much as with the funders, in order to be able to think, to work sustainably. Many are already doing that, so I don't want to ignore the fabulous work that a lot of people are doing, but I want to encourage that. I also want to encourage funders to think about meting out funding during this time and afterwards. In periods of time, I think what we're experiencing right now is a sort of a rush, sort of who gets there first, who has the information first and can act on that, which obviously has real structural problems. And so I want to encourage strategic thinking and creativity about how you structure that. One possibility in terms of like, look at, we have months of the year structuring funding where pots of money are not all put at once, but structured differently, so that as more people get information about the funding, there is there's still funding available. Yeah, I just want to encourage everybody to step forward, and thank you.
Thank you, Mankwei. Okay, up next we have Vicki Stenerson, and then on deck we have Lori Bunce.
Hi, my name is Vicki Stenerson. I'm the president of the Bemidji Community Theater, way up here north in Bemidji, Minnesota. A year and a half ago, we purchased our first home, never knowing that this was going to happen. This situation has put a real strain on our finances, of course, like everybody else. We rely a great deal on underwriters to do our productions. We do 5 productions a year. And the underwriters are the local small businesses. Well, of course, that's going to dry up for a while because those small businesses, of course, have to take care of themselves and their employees first. And I do want to thank the Region 2 Arts Council up here in northern Minnesota who supports us unfailingly. It's just wonderful. But I too agree that we need I think we need to relook at our operational grant monies. That keeps the businesses, gets their feet on the ground so they can innovate and figure out new ways to present the arts to the region and local communities, which we have great support in. But money's going to be tight for a while. And I think I agree with everyone else. We're going to have to really think about different ways to get our arts out there and crassly earn income in order to support our organizations. And we appreciate any ideas that anybody's coming up with. And as Fred mentioned, we are doing some radio shows with our local radio stations just to keep our name out there and let the community know we haven't gone under. So thank you very much for this meeting. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Vicki. Our next speaker is Lori Bunce.
Yes. Hi, I'm Lori Bunce, and I work with a small theater, and we do want to know how to get started again, and what do you do with summer camps? Can we still do them? That's what we're kind of waiting to find out. But what I do want to say is I want to give a little bit of hope. I'm also a realtor, and so I've been a lot of webinars, and not everybody agrees on this, but a lot of economists are saying it's going to bounce back because that's the history of pandemics. So I just say that to give hope, because if it does bounce back, even if it's, not the arts right away, big companies, that will trickle down to small companies and to theater. And so I just felt like I wanted to say, don't give up, hang in there, and have hope.
All right, well, thank you very, very much. We've come to the end of our speakers, and we were going to give each of our sponsors a few seconds to say thank you. And so first up among our sponsors is the Minnesota Theater Alliance.
Hi, everybody. This is Joanna Schnedler. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Theater Alliance, joining you from my really messy and crazy basement in Richfield. And I just want to say thank you so much for all being here. I'm inspired by all of you and amazed by the really wonderful, inspiring people that we have here. And I'm inspired about opportunities like this to meet and connect and exchange ideas across the entire state of Minnesota. So thank you all.
Next up would be the Minnesota Minnesota State Arts Board. I apologize for that. And then there was one speaker who got left off, and she'll follow up after the State Arts Board. State Arts Board.
Thanks, Drew. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you're unmuted.
Okay. I just wanted to echo and say thank you to everyone who is participating in this call today and providing input and feedback in other ways. The fundamental work of the arts is to bring people together. And we know that the coronavirus has upended that work in profound and really previously unimaginable ways. We also know that, at least for the foreseeable future, social distancing will be with us. So I'm really grateful to all of you who are thinking creatively about how to adapt and how to pivot to new ways of engaging Minnesotans with the work that you do and the really vital connections that you can create through the arts. And the words adaptability, flexibility have really been things that have jumped out at me today. So thanks for that, and thanks for all you are doing right now and into the future.
All right, thank you. We did have one speaker that we accidentally dropped, Maria Hart.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. I'm an independent artist, and I had a conflict with the independent artists meeting on Thursday. So just to say that creative artists are the backbone of our arts community. I've worked on many publicly funded projects in theater, music, and dance, and many involving youth performers, youth audience, and all of them involving small organizations and collaborations with independent artists. Our current MRAC project, they've graciously allowed us to retool it, and we're pivoting to video. And I can tell you, if you don't know, the difficulty and expense and time-consuming nature of rehearsing and performing remotely. This is not the same medium as live theater or live music, and is not the practice of live artists. I would urge people to think about, if they want to sustain the practice of creators in fields like dance, music, and theater, to consider giving them dollars, space, and time to create without the traditional expectations of audience that are currently built into a lot of the funding mechanisms. And that might include adjusting expectations presently of what a public presentation is. It could be the production of a musical score, production of a script, presentation of script or score to performers for critique and rehearsal, readings of plays, and including compensation of performers in those situations. We're very interested in audience, of course, but we have to deal with this as a transitional moment and not abandon the creative practice of us artists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to let the rest of our sponsors say something. Minnesota Citizens for the Arts. Sheila.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your ideas and feelings about this quickly moving crisis, which has come on so fast and has been devastating to artists and arts organizations of every size in every corner of the state. We're all in the same situation, responding as quickly as we can with the tools at hand, working at home with shrinking resources. Minnesota Citizens for the Arts is working at the Capitol to give the State Arts Board and Regional Arts Councils, and they are a single system, FYI, the state system for delivering arts funding to communities. They're not separate, they're one big system. As much flexibility for grantees as possible, including pushing back the dates by which the dollars must be spent, and turning as much of the support as possible into operating support for artists and arts organizations. I am sorry to say there will be less public dollars for the next few years because of the crisis in the economy caused by COVID-19 closures, and because the legacy amendment is funded by the state sales tax. Because the revenues to the state and to the legacy fund will be dropping over the next year, when the legislature starts to contemplate cuts, we'll need to fight like hell to retain as much arts funding as we can. We don't know when that will be. Will they have a special session this summer or fall? Will they wait till the regular session in January? I want you to know that we will do everything we can to support and preserve as much money as possible for the arts. What you all do is so important, and the way you bring community together to share experiences and our common humanity is part of the answer to getting us all out of this crisis. And I can't wait to turn the corner until we are talking about recovery and reopening. Thanks.
Thank you, Sheila. Up next is the Minnesota Presenters Network.
Hey everybody, it's Blake Potoff. I'm the Executive Director at the Fairmont Opera House in Fairmont and the current chair of the Minnesota Presenters Network. It is so wonderful to see everybody, to hear from everybody, and really first and foremost, I hope everybody stays healthy and that your family and your friends, everybody's staying healthy as well. It's so empowering in this time to be hearing all of these stories and be so well connected with everybody. I think it's imperative moving forward that we rely on one another more than we ever have in the past. We're all a symbiotic relationship. We all need each other to exist. And the more conversations we can have around how we move forward, find our new sense of normal after this pandemic and this crisis, I think the better off our field is going to be. We may have been hit really hard and be down at this point, but I sense so much power and so much energy in this group that's here today. And I know in every corner of the state, there are people who are working very hard. I'm just so encouraged by that. So I look forward to continued conversations with everybody, and I can't wait until we all have our renaissance coming out of this, where all of our organizations and all of our work can be reborn and lead our communities and our region and our nation forward through arts and empowerment. So thank you all, stay healthy, and if you need anything from myself, please reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat, but please, please, please do not hesitate to reach out. So love you all, sending virtual hugs, take care of yourselves.
Thank you, Blake. Next up from our sponsors is Arts Midwest. Tori?
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today, sharing your hearts and your thoughts. Connecting with you this morning has been moving and hugely helpful. Arts Midwest is one of six national region-based arts organizations that primarily operate directly with the National Endowment for the Arts and your state arts councils. We focus on connecting communities, nurturing leadership, building organizational capacity, and supporting arts programs. Service and community are very big values in our world. And again, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and ideas today. If you have additional ideas and thoughts about how we can support you, how we can show up now, please don't hesitate to be in touch. And virtual hugs to all of you.
Thank you very much. Next up is the City of Minneapolis Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi. It's everyone else by saying it's really moving to see you all and hear you all. It's I've been very isolated, as many of you have, in my own bubble. So just to feel part of a larger system is really it's I don't know what to say. It brings me to tears. So thank you for participating. In the city of Minneapolis, we haven't typically been a traditional funder, but our efforts have been just to mobilize whatever resources we could access immediately to partner and get funds out. We've also been thinking very intentionally about the resources we do have available, because we are, like everybody else, aware that they're going to be cut in 2020, and we are being asked to also cut funding this year in order to stay alive. Many folks in the city are looking at furloughs and reducing staff. So we're trying to move as quickly as we can and also be as mindful as we can as we think about a new future. Some of you have talked about WPA, and I can certainly tell you that that is the conversation among my colleagues across the country. Many of us are thinking about WPA types of ideas and how to collaborate more intentionally with communities. I am geographically restricted to Minneapolis, but always willing to listen and collaborate with anyone really that I can. I held community office hours regularly, and I'll put my email in the chat so anyone can reach out. We also have some pro bono resources we can point you towards. and information to share. So thank you, everyone. Keep well.
Thank you very much. Next up from our sponsors is Springboard for the Arts.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carl Attia Swanson. I'm the Associate Director at Springboard for the Arts. Thank you to all of you for sharing all of your insights and what you're doing and what you're thinking about. It's not a cliche to say that we're all in this together, because it's very true. And what we're doing now is planting the seeds for the future we want and rehearsing the future that we want. And so these kind of gatherings are so important to make that happen. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for collaborating and organizing already in the chat. Thank you for bringing yourselves together and for moving this forward, because we need to do this together to build the future. I just wanted to share a couple other Springboard resources. We have our own emergency relief fund that we have been running since the pandemic hit, that we'll be doing that through the 1st of July 2020. Our goal is to get $1 million back into the hands of artists and creative workers in Minnesota in the form of emergency relief support. And then we also have a coronavirus resources page that includes legal and technical support resources around unemployment insurance, around artist career consultations, and other resources there. So please take advantage of those resources and the resources of all of these colleagues now, so that we can survive and thrive together to build that future. And we're going to keep on doing that. This is a snapshot, this is a moment, and we'll move forward together. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Carl. I wanted to say thank you to everyone, but I was going to turn it over to my colleague, Kathy, for a final goodbye. Kathy?
Thank you, Drew. And I want to thank you on behalf of the Forum of Regional Arts Councils of Minnesota, which is made up of all of the 11 regional arts councils throughout the state. We want to thank you for joining us today. We want to thank all of the speakers for sharing your concerns and your ideas. And definitely want to echo everybody that talked about this being the time for solidarity. It's so important right now for all of the different communities across the state that make up the Minnesota arts and cultural community. This is the time for us to come together. This is also a time of crisis, but so much opportunity can come out of that. We've heard your thoughts and your inspiration for how we can imagine the future. All the sponsors, and so today's meeting, Town Hall, has been recorded. It'll be shared with all of the sponsors. And I, for sure, will be going through and listening to everything again. There's so many important points that were made. But we will also be sending out an email following this with all the contacts for the sponsors. So if you want to reach out to any of us directly, you will have our contact information there. So thank you so much. I'm just going to also send out some virtual hugs to everybody. Thank you.